When you go, right, no, this year is going to be different. I'm going to set some big goals, but this time, what's different? Well, this time I really mean it. Meanwhile, you or your subconscious knows you don't even get up when your alarm goes off.
Any goal is going to come with challenges and it's going to have a cost associated with it. So you can go into that goal naive and say, it's going to be so great when I've got this health and fitness. It's only good. That fantasy idea again. But we need to also look at what are the challenges, the obstacles, what's the cost of doing it?
The fastest way to change your life is to get around people whose base standards are your life goals.
Goals that we're setting, they need to be audited on, is it truly meaningful and purposeful, where we will embrace the challenges in pursuit of the purpose. So I want the listeners today to be thinking about 4 key questions. Greg, part 2, how to finally stick to your goals. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, great. There's obviously so much to cover, and looking forward to diving deep in this one with some more practical tools to have an even better chance of achieving your goals. I think that if the listeners can just take a few key things and add that to, or take away some things on how they're looking to achieve their goals, that's going to be really, really helpful.
Absolutely. In the last episode, I know at a very high level, we spoke about that pain or pleasure level of motivation, the purpose-driven approach. I think there was a lot of great theory, the psychological aspect, but also as we spoke about, the purpose of this format is the practical self-development side of things. So we thought we need to do that justice. We need to actually let's walk the listeners through more practically how they can implement this, because it's such a big topic and we haven't even got to procrastination, self-sabotage, avoidance patterns, which I'm sure can be other episodes in the future. So where are we starting today, Greg?
Well, one of the things that's really important is that I want to touch on was identity. When we touch on that, another is this is becoming the sort of person who does the thing that leads to the outcome.
Yes.
Another one that we'll touch on is community, the importance of community and joining a community with the change you seek is normal, why that's really important. Another one is around shaping the environment, that it's conducive to achieving the goals through the habits that you're looking to achieve. So a number of different things there. Habit stacking is another one as well. But for yourself, is there any key thing you think as we get started?
Yes. Look, I'm keen to give you the floor for the most part today, Greg. But the only thing I'll say is to set this up well, and we touched on this last week, but to make it practical is, auditing where are these goals coming from? As we've said previously, are they coming from these injected idealisms? I think you said, borrowed goals or other people's goals, that sort of thing. Or are they coming from truly what gives you a sense of purpose, where you do integrate the polarities, you do embrace that challenge or pain in pursuit of the mission? So there's 2 things to share. The first is I've actually created a resource that I've updated that I use for my personal clients around getting clear on your values or purpose priorities. So we're going to have that in the show notes on YouTube today. So, if you're already on YouTube, check that out. If you're on Spotify or another platform, you can go to YouTube, check out that link. That will actually guide you through that process practically, because the values idea it's not going away. It is going to be a core tenet of what we speak about, because it is crucial. But just quickly up here and now, if we're listening to this in the car, we can't just pull out the workbook perhaps. What I would suggest is, again, the goals that we're setting, they need to be audited on, is it truly meaningful and purposeful, where we will embrace the challenges in pursuit of the purpose. So I want the listeners today to be thinking about 4 key questions. And these are, 4 out of the 10 questions that they'll find in the values purpose resource that they can download. So one would be, what are their most consistent long-term goals? Over the course of their life, what have been the goals they've been the most consistent in working towards? Top 3 answers, identifying any themes there. Second would be top 3 things you love to learn about most. Where do you come alive? Okay, this doesn't have to be formal study, academic. This can be talking to a friend, YouTube videos, magazines. What do you love to learn about? Next would be top 3 things you spend or invest your money on. Okay. Obviously, we are only going to, generally speaking, what we value most, we're going to be willing to invest in. So is that, financial investments? Is that, dinners or with our friends or family, or drinks representing a social element perhaps? Or is it self-development, or psychology or coaching? And lastly, where are you most ordered and organized? Okay, so very common that we would say, "Oh, I'm not organized. I'm not organized anywhere, Hayden. The house is a mess." But perhaps if you look in a different area of their life, whether it's their self-development or their hunting and fishing or their career or their investments and finance, they will have organization in the areas that are the most important to you. So I could speak to the values framework for hours, and I think we'll do a special series on that perhaps in the future. But very quickly, I want the listeners, please, to reflect on those three to four questions, looking at the top three answers for each, starting to see what are those themes of where they're authentically inspired from within, where they do take action, because their purpose, their values are going to be in that area if they start peeling back those layers. So take a moment, pause the show if you need to, start reflecting on that. And I think as long as everything is built from that foundation upwards, I'm keen to hear what you have to share, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we've talked about it in the previous episode. If that's missing, then it doesn't matter what sort of tactical habits and other things you do. It's not going to stick. Or if you do, you're going to go, why did I achieve that long term? That wasn't aligned. Yeah. So coming to that identity piece, I think this is often missed when you think I'm just going to go and do this thing. I'm going to set out and achieve this goal, but there's a misaligned identity in how we actually see ourselves, and fundamentally we will fight to protect the identity that we have of ourselves.
Yes.
It's like an internal thermostat that if we go above it, the thermostat clicks off and brings us back down to that. Or if we go beneath it, it clicks on and brings us back to that sort of equilibrium or the autopilot of our lives. We can fight the control stick, but ultimately if we let it go, it's going to come back to our identity. And I think one of the things with habits is we can start with you could say specifically, say I am the sort of person who, we used the example last time, running. I am the sort of person who runs, or I'm the sort of person who exercises. That can be a final state that feels like it's misaligned with identity. Another way to phrase that might be a becoming statement. I am the sort of person. I am the sort of person who works hard to prioritize my health. I think that you talked about one of those more base values
Yes.
ones. That's rather than like I am a runner or not. How do I define that? I'm the sort of person who prioritizes my health and is prepared to work for it. And that can be fundamental. One of the key things around identity when it comes to habits is being someone who actually follows through on what they say they're going to do. And so when this is, I know I've experienced this, I imagine a lot of listeners have, when you go, right, no, this year is going to be different. I'm going to set some big goals, but this time, what's different? Well, this time I really mean it, but I
Yeah.
really, really, really mean it. And I really want it. Meanwhile, you or your subconscious knows you don't even get up when your alarm goes off. You've got heaps of other areas where you don't follow through on what you say. And so there's a misalignment sometimes of making and keeping commitments to yourself.
Yes.
So I'd say at the very base identity of sticking to your New Year's goals would be trying to form an identity that is, I am the sort of person who follows through on what I say I'm going to do. A number of years ago, I put this into practice and I was like, what's the smallest commitment that I can make and keep to myself to start building that up? Because I basically didn't believe that I was able to make and keep commitments. So when I set big ones, my subconscious, I think, was saying, ha, sure, of course you won't. So that was just start really small
Mm.
and realize, I set that really small thing. Like I set my alarm and I got up. I set my alarm and I got up. Oh, I've done that twice in a row, and there's
Mm.
other small areas. And that can be just about becoming the sort of person who makes and keeps commitments.
Yes.
That can then grow out from self to then others. I've heard about it with books on the speed of trust and building trust in organizations, the same thing. Make and keep commitments to yourself, then make and keep commitments to others, then make and keep organizational commitments, then make and keep societal commitments. So coming back to the smallest identity piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, perhaps someone, could think, oh, well, that, it sounds so small, or it's so minor, or it's nothing to be celebrated. And perhaps what I'd say to that is, again, let's get off this roller coaster of the highs or the lows, and let's actually go, great. Is it aligned with the values? Yes, we've audited that. all right, what are the actions you can take, starting with small ones, that will compound over time, but actually build your self worth because you have integrity in following through what's most meaningful to you and what's sincere there. So I love that, especially starting, practically with the smaller wins. The other thing I'll just add to that, Greg, before I throw it back to you, is you mentioned such a key idea. I know we touched on this very briefly in the first episode around the identity piece, right? And so we may have these conscious judgments of ourselves that we are self-aware of. Oh, well, I haven't achieved this goal in the past, or when I last put myself out there, I failed. On top of that, for better or worse, we also have all the unconscious baggage of perhaps times where we've judged ourselves and we're holding on to judgments and self-criticism of certain past scenarios. And I think one exercise that I would get the viewers to do, because it is very easy, consciously or unconsciously, to dwell on where we perceive we haven't taken action or haven't followed through.
Yeah.
Challenge that and find ways to actually build a stronger sense of worth or identity, and actually looking at, well, where is the opposite true? So, perhaps maybe last year, maybe you didn't take action consistently on your financial goals, but maybe in a different area of your life, again, in your values, most likely, you can go, well, where is the opposite true? Where have I taken action, right? And whether it's in that same area, but in a different way, like I said the other week, it may not be health and fitness, it may be, meditation, but it's still under that umbrella value of health, perhaps. Or it may not be that they haven't achieved their financial goals, but they have achieved their career goals. So actually challenging yourself rather than buying into this one-sided judgment and identity piece of, I failed in the past, what's going to be different there? Actually challenging that narrative, building a list of 3 to 4 other areas of your life, other examples, other values, where the opposite is true, where you have actually taken action, where you have had a success, so you can challenge that idea and have a more integrated, a more balanced sense of self going into this identity piece.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. The other piece is around community. And I think this is often missed with the
Mhm.
idea of joining a community where the change you seek is normal. And this can be where you say, hey, I aspire to, something in business. It's where online communities, being able to find, say, oh, well, I don't know anyone like that. I don't have any friends like that. Is there a community somewhere that you can join where you're all moving in the same direction? And this is a key idea where whatever is normal in your closest community, or where you attribute most value, both ways, you to them and them to you, it tends to become your baseline.
Yes.
So, if it's normal for your friend group to um, talk about going on, and to go on, I'll use a practical example, to go on adventures in the weekend and get outdoors, you don't go, oh, should we maybe? That's just what we do. It
Mm.
becomes very strong. Equally, if you chat about finances and investments and those sorts of things, then that can be a normal thing. And so it can be people that are going on the journey. An example of say joining a specific gym, or people that are getting fit. There can be a relational aspect that's really strong, maybe even tribal, or
Mm.
like feeling connected with people that are choosing to prioritize your health, and that can reflect, I think, through relationships in a really strong way, that it feeds back into the identity piece, that I am the sort of person who does this. But that's often missing.
Absolutely, Greg. And in doing that, you will find other like-minded individuals. They may not have the exact same values, structure, or hierarchy as you, because that would be unrealistic. But to have similar or complementary values where they're supporting and challenging you in what your goals are. So I think that's huge. And again, from an action-orientated piece, where would you suggest the listeners start to with that? I guess it would be challenging yourself to look at what are these groups? What is this environment? How?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going back to your piece of working out what is the values aligned piece for the meaningful goals that they have. Then going, what are the behaviors or the habits that are going to align, that will end up taking me towards that goal? So, what are
Yes.
those specific behaviors? And then going, who already models these behaviors? Either going, who has, I saw a quote the other day that said that the fastest way to change your life is to get around people whose base standards are your life goals.
Mm.
And I think there's some degree of truth to that, but I think there can also be power in people that are going on that journey.
Yes.
There's a risk if you're all trying and figuring it out and muddling along, then you don't move forward, because that becomes the shared identity. We're all
Mhm.
just working it out, but no one's really got there. It's the blind leading the blind. but then finding a community where have people actually achieved the end outcome, and are there people on the journey? And so that could be in person, I think is really powerful if there's things that are local, spaces that are local.
Mm.
But yeah, you could use an example for finance. Is it investment? Is it reaching a goal in your business? Is it having more time and developing systems in relationships? Is it being a present father, being really intentional? Is it getting fit? There's micro niches as well. There's dads who lift, and then there's like, you got the combined niche of, hey, I'm a dad, but I have the pressures of that and I
Yes.
want to lift heavy weights, and you
Yes.
get very specific banter, accountability, fun, or specific sports or whatever. So I think that's very tailored.
Yeah.
That's really key for community.
Greg, I think that's huge, and the only thing that I will put with that, as we said, the psychology and the development is, one thing we've spoken a lot about previously is making sure that they're your goals and your values, not others. And so the community piece is huge, and creating that environment, but also I think being as clear as possible and checking in with yourself that you are, you're not perhaps being influenced by other people's values. Now, an example of that, perhaps to be practical, is, I value my health and I prioritize training, right? And let's say that I could, let's say, in the spirit of the creating the environment and the relational side of things, maybe I could catch up with a couple of guys, maybe like yourself, and maybe we find a time to go to the gym regularly together. However, my value on health or my health and fitness goals may look differently or may be expressed differently. I.e., Greg wants to be a bodybuilder. I just want to be fitter and be there for my kids a bit more, be a bit more mobile. So we might be connecting under this umbrella sort of term or somewhat shared value of health and fitness, but the actual way that it plays out or what it means to us, it could actually be fundamentally different. And so I think just also going, yes, we need this environment, huge, but also again, being careful that we're not losing ourselves or shifting that value into what it looks like for the others and conforming there. Because again, that then leads us back to some of these other dynamics with other callers and other topics we've spoke about. So really being clear on the value, and I think perhaps we haven't touched on this yet, but being precise with the goal. So actually defining what that is and what your value behind that is. Because again, self-development looks different to different people. One thing I really respect about, we're both very, both love business, both very invested in the individual client work we do. One thing I really respect and love about what you do is how you are challenging yourself to be able to create a life where you're not working the 40 hours a week, right? And I love that. Now, that said, we're both invested in business, but that isn't something that I personally do in my framework. And so in that example, it would be unwise for me to put that ideal on myself, even though they could both be under that same umbrella of business development. So looking at what that goal looks like for you and just checking that with the other people as well. So drawing on it, but not losing yourself in it.
Yeah. And a practical example of that for me, I think, was going, I hadn't developed a workout or fitness habit. I really wanted to. I joined a local gym where some friends were going, and there's a bit of banter and fun. And it was, hey, like, we're going to go at these times together and you see each other. And that was great. Then they dropped off, or there's different times, and I found I was still going. So it'd been like a slingshot where the community piece was important initially. And then I found I really wasn't enjoying it. And so I checked in with myself and thought, why am I not enjoying this? Why do I not want to go? And one of my values is around freedom and around adventure. And it was that actually a different environment of taking the consistency of being able to work out and putting it in a different environment. It was actually, I love working out outdoors. It's very, not everyone's that way wired. And I was like, I thought it was relationship. That was the key thing. But actually it was, I've had built enough. I'm the kind of person who can go to the gym even if no one else is going. That was a new thing for me because I definitely didn't have it. I'm the sort of person who can work out because I just value it.
Yes.
And then I was like, well, actually, if I could do this outdoors and with bands or with a kettlebell and have some cranking music, I found that was the motivating environment.
So what you're actually speaking to there, Greg, is another really great point that I'll quickly speak to, which is, creating more links or more meaning behind what you're doing. And, if the listeners were to go through the values process that that we've spoke about earlier, you'll find that your purpose will really be a combination of multiple values, but they are individual drivers. And so the more overlap you can see
Right.
between them and you can create, the more natural buy-in you'll have. I.e., if I love problem solving in my client work and that also supports my family and my financial freedom goals, then there's three very powerful purpose-driven reasons for me to be invested in my business.
Mm.
And I think, what you're speaking to there is, and I know we've done your values before. And so there's that sort of outdoors adventure component. There's also the health and fitness component. Well, again, let's not put these idealisms on yourself. You have to be a be a bodybuilder. You have to be training 5 times a week. It has to be this. Actually, let's set something up more sustainable that interrelates multiple values so there's more intrinsic buy-in. So I think that also speaks to something really wise there. When you're actually setting the goals, again, are they a natural, effective, and efficient
Mm.
expression of your values, or are they borrowed goals? Oh, I've just heard I need to strength train. Oh, I want to look good for someone else. Or actually, is it health and fitness in a way that supports your values?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, most recently is realizing my kids currently are, how old are they? 6, 5, and 2. And realizing that in 10 years' time, I'm currently 38, I'm going to be 48, and going, they will be 16, 15, and 12. They are high energy. And I'm going, okay, what is the outdoors fun stuff? And having that picture that's relational, energetic, having some of that picture has been much more motivating than I just need to get in better shape because I don't want a dad bod. So without bringing it back into that fully, I've definitely agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, well, Greg, I'll so my final spiel, and again, we're powering through this because we wanted to give the practical insights. So I mean, really, what you've done there is, perhaps unknowingly, but this is why I would suggest you'll actually stick that goal out and achieve it, is because knowing you, your family, and your kids are very important, very high on your values, and so you've actually associated that you prioritizing your own health and fitness will actually support. You being there more for your kids, you being more mobile there, you being able to even if we think longer than that 10-year time horizon, right? Be there for the great grandkids, things like this. So, connecting the dots of how the goal actually supports those values is huge. And, there's the practical component. The last thing that I have to share today is, you know, determining the goal clearly and then actually coming up with what are the benefits to your values, to what gives you a sense of purpose of how achieving this goal is going to support that. So, exactly what you've just said, just case in point, that you have this health and fitness goal, let's say. And, outside of just a whole look better or have more confidence, how does it support your family? How does it support your kids? Does it actually benefit them seeing a father who has discipline, who prioritizes his health and fitness? Does it benefit if you have financial as a value for you? Does it benefit your finances, that if you look after yourself, you may have less sick days and thus you can have a higher income, things like this. So looking at, I would challenge the viewers to actually really challenge themselves to list out 20 benefits to them and to what's most important to them in their life of achieving the goal. Okay. So that's one. Now, the flip side of that, which may sound counterintuitive, but hear me out, Greg, hear me out, is looking at what are the drawbacks of achieving this goal. Okay.
Drawbacks of achieving the
Drawbacks
goal.
of achieving it. Absolutely.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
stay with me. So the reason this one's important is we spoke about this in the former episode, which was, setting the goals not from the seeking of pleasure and avoiding of the pain, but from the purpose and the values driven orientation. Now, as we've said previously, if you're taking action on a goal that is truly aligned with your values, you have the adaptability and resilience, you embrace the pain, you embrace the challenges in pursuit of the mission. So any goal is going to come with challenges and it's going to have a cost associated with it. So you can go into that goal naive and say, it's going to be so great when I've got this health
Only
and
good.
fitness. It's only good. That fantasy idea again. Well, we can say that it's going to support your values and your vision and grow your self-worth. No problem. Great. But we need to also look at what are the challenges, the obstacles, what's the cost of doing it, right? So, I work with a couple of professional athletes and people might look to them and they'll say, oh, this is so amazing what they do. They travel the world, etc. Well, drawbacks to them. They miss their children's birthday. There's a lot of pressure on them to perform. They go into a restaurant and they have to talk to everyone and put on the mask of who others expect them to be. And so those are real, factual drawbacks or challenges that come with this meaningful goal. And so I always say to clients, we can go into it objective and self-governed and know that there is benefits to our values and purpose of achieving this goal, but we also need to know what's required because, time is a limiting factor and things go wrong. And you'll know this, whether it's in business or raising kids is kind of maybe an obvious example that people know. You don't necessarily have kids to be happy. You have kids or raise a family to be more fulfilled and have that purpose and vision, right? And so I would suggest approaching the goals the same way. So 25 benefits of how it supports your values, but also getting real with yourself, 20 to 25 drawbacks of what is the cost of implementing this habit. And then you go into that being objective and being real and avoiding the emotional roller coaster because you've been thinking long term of how the goal supports the vision, not the avoidance of pain or the seeking of pleasure.
Yeah, really powerful. It's not something that I've done, and I can see how that would be really powerful to know that
Mm.
ahead of time. Also, that it doesn't throw you off when those things
Yeah.
happen. You go, I knew this was coming. I planned for it, and I accepted that that was part of it
Mm.
when I made the decision.
Well, I'll just jump into to that, Greg, and then I'll throw it back to you. But if it does turn you off, great, because now you've just audited that that wasn't a true goal, a
You're not
true
willing to
values
pay
aligned
that
goal. You're not
price.
willing to pay that price. Let's not judge yourself. Let's acknowledge that. Great. It's not as high on your values as maybe you thought it were,
Mm.
or perhaps again, it's a borrowed goal.
Yeah.
So, in looking at what are the drawbacks to it, if you go, oh, this isn't really, I'm a bit worried about it, it's not really worth it. Maybe it's not your goal. Maybe it's not as high priorities
Mm.
as you think it is, or maybe it's simply not the right time. So, one of two things will happen. You'll actually go into it more objective, breaking that fantasy, being prepared to do what it takes, knowing what it takes, or you'll actually determine this was actually a goal that wasn't aligned. And
Yeah.
either one is actually setting yourself up to achieve sustainable goals.
Yeah, powerful. As a practical example, we set a big goal last year to take all our family to Spain for a wedding and travel for a month.
Mm.
Not cheap when the kids are over 2, and so you're paying an air ticket for every kid. We moved out of our house, rented it out, stayed with my wife's parents, and we had a number of people saying to us, "Why would you want to travel with young kids? They won't even remember it. What a waste of money." My brother was like, "Shouldn't you invest that money?" All these other things, and we thought, this is not a money-based decision; it's a values-based decision in terms of being there for that.
Yes.
But also, and in you saying that, I realized we told ourselves we're just going to be parenting in another country.
Hmm.
Our expectations in terms of the drawbacks, we'd talked about all those, and we knew what they would be on traveling with kids. And so we felt like we were going in really, not naively,
Mm.
really clearly. And a bunch of people said to us, traveling with kids is horrible. And I'm thinking, yeah, if you think it's going to be like it was traveling without kids, then absolutely, the gap is massive. And then other people said we traveled with kids. It was actually amazing. We loved it. Like you won't regret it a bit. And the mindset between the people was massive, which was, I think, what you've talked about.
Yes.
One had counted the cost, looked at it and gone, yeah, I mean, there were days where you spent half a day at a playground and you're not off sightseeing. And we knew that before we went,
Mm.
that all the days and all our travel would be based around. When we were in our 20s, we did 3 months around Europe in the back of a van. It was how many countries can we see? How much can we see in the shortest amount of time? This trip was based around how little can we travel from when we arrive and how long can we stay in a single place before we get bored, because if we're basing it around family, movement will be the death of the trip
Mm.
because the kids are going to get ratty. So as a practical example, we lived that when we came back. We were like, that was the most amazing trip. Not because it wasn't hard, but because we had extremely low expectations. When I say low, I mean you're parenting in a different country and you
Yes.
get to see a few things.
Yes.
But we counted that cost and we had the best time instead
Mm.
of, oh, we get back and going, shoot, the kids screamed on the plane. We knew they probably would, Anyway, with
Well,
the practical
Greg,
side.
I mean that is truly the perfect example. And just to close today's episode out, what I'll say is, as much as clearly we're talking about giving yourself the mental tools, the frameworks to audit these goals and set yourself up for success. When you are truly aligned with your values, you will naturally think that way. You will naturally look at what are the challenges, what are the costs, and you will plan for that. Because again, it's not coming from the seeking of pleasure and this hedonistic, emotional roller coaster, avoiding the lows, seeking the highs. It's coming from that values and purpose and that vision for the family and the kids and those experiences. So, you integrated those two organically.
We just didn't have the framework to talk about it. We were living it already.
Well, there you go, Greg. I think the fantastic episode. I think a lot of practical actionables to hopefully bring together part one and apply that. A lot in there. I don't think, just to manage expectations for those listening, I don't think it's a quick 5-minute journal. I think, between the values resource, between some of those questions, generally speaking, the looking at the benefits, looking at the drawbacks, those are tough questions, just to clarify. You might get 2 or 3. You have to really challenge yourself, probably over an hour, to answer those questions. So it's not easy, it's not pleasureful, but it is meaningful and it is aligned, which is obviously the tenets of the show in today's episode. So thank you for tuning in for part 2. Please, as I said, if it's helpful, check out the resources in the show notes on YouTube. I didn't actually mention, but we do actually have, in addition to the values resource, we actually have a goal setting resource as well, which builds on some of the things that we've spoke about today. So please check that out if that's relevant. And of course, as per, leave us a comment with what you've got out of the show or what you'd love to see in the future. Until next time.